This morning, the war came to Ben Gurion, Israel's only international airport.
Whoa! Whoa! Whoa, it's a boom!
There's one foreign militant group still capable of launching such an attack, and it fired a missile which landed not far from the main terminal building. This spokesman for Houthi rebels, who control much of Yemen, said the attack was in support of the Palestinian people and against what he called genocide. At the scene itself, an Israeli policeman said there was no significant damage with no serious casualties. But European and American airlines have cancelled flights, and after weeks of Houthi missile launches, one was eventually bound to get through. Israel bans journalists from Gaza, but the army has provided these pictures of its expanding military operation, involving the mobilization of thousands of reservists. The army says that dozens of Hamas fighters have been killed this past week, along with 2 Israeli soldiers.
We have 2 missions, one to bring our hostages back and 2 to defeat Hamas. Hamas will no longer be there. You have to understand this.
But protesters in Tel Aviv accused their prime minister of being more focused on military victory than releasing hostages. 59 of them are still missing, with only 24 of them thought to be alive. And the longer this war lasts, more of them could be killed.
The main issue is that the military operation is going stronger and stronger, and they're talking about bringing more troops and reserves, and we're really afraid that it's going to kill most of the hostages.
But what of Gaza's people themselves? Inside their family tent, Ahmed's parents take off his top to show the effect of Israel's aid blockade on the body of a 7-year-old child. His smallest sibling, Khaled, weighs just half what a 9-month-old should. This, one of more than 9,000 children, UNICEF says have been treated for acute malnutrition in Gaza so far this year.
Jonathan Rugman reporting there. Well, I've been speaking to Mahmoud Al-Saka, who is in Gaza, where he runs Oxfam's food distribution security. I asked him to give us a sense of the situation on the ground right now.
It has been now 63 days since Israeli authorities imposed a complete blockade on all the supplies coming into Gaza. So we are facing a catastrophic humanitarian situation. And today we are seeing that Gaza again is on the brink of famine, because it's simply there is no food left in Gaza. We have noticed some improvement in February during the ceasefire, but unfortunately it's quickly reversed. To be honest, the words cannot fully convey the severity of the current situation on the ground in Gaza Strip. Yeah.
I mean, as you say, you are entering the 3rd month of this blockade of aid by the Israeli government. Tell me what supplies, if any, are left.
Nowadays, in Gaza, the families cannot barely manage to have a meal a day. The market is dysfunctional. There is no meat, no eggs, no dairy products. And there is a scarcity even in the vegetables. So the markets, it's become almost empty. And if it's available, it's unaffordable. We are talking of soaring prices. You can imagine that a sack of wheat flour with 25 kilograms is about $500. It used to be by $15. Community kitchens nowadays are the only lifeline for food assistance now. The people spend hours in front of these community kitchens in order to get their meals, and it's not guaranteed even to have their meals. The people, you can see the people are gathering the remnants of the food from the ground, and the children is craving the last bits from the empty food containers. So the people nowadays are eating whatever they find, even if it's unclean or unhealthy.
I mean, what needs to happen? Israel has said it will not lift the blockade until Hamas release the remaining hostages. What do you want to see? Is it pressure from the outside world on Hamas to release the hostages? Pressure from the outside world on the Israeli government to move their position? What would you like to see now?
What we would like to see is to not weaponize the food. According to the international humanitarian law, it's not even allowed to use the food and the humanitarian supplies as a weapon, as a means for make this pressure to Hamas or others. They need to have a pressure and more pressure on the Israeli authorities to open the crossings and borders so we can get our supplies and the humanitarian supplies without any restrictions. We need to work freely in supporting the people without taking all these issues into consideration, the militarization and the weaponization of the food.
And can I ask you finally, and very briefly if you would, do you think the outside world should be ashamed of its approach to Gaza at the minute?
I'm not sure how they are just passively scrolling, this horrifying images and videos that the suffering of the Gazas without having an action to all these things. This is make a lot of people are losing faith of the international community and the international community principles and laws. So this is why we are insisting there is still a window for interventions, an urgent intervention and action in that regards to support and to save the people who are living here.
Mahmoud Al-Saka, thank you very much for talking to us today.
Thank you.
Well, also earlier I spoke to the Labour MP, Emily Thornberry, who's chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, and I asked her first for her assessment of the situation in Gaza.
There is absolutely no excuse for holding back on aid and food and supplies to be allowed to go into Gaza. The Israelis simply must allow the gates to be opened. We cannot allow food to be simply rotting on the outskirts of Gaza and people to be starving within it. These are innocent civilians. It is quite wrong. They must be allowed to have aid.
I mean, we've just spoken to Oxfam's food security lead, who accuses the international community of passively scrolling through horrific images of what is happening in Gaza and doing nothing. Is he right?
I think anybody who sees those pictures cannot be passively scrolling. I do think that's insulting. It is really difficult, though, when you make it perfectly clear to the Israelis what it is that the international community believes beyond shadow of doubt that they should be doing, and the Israelis simply refuse to do it. There can be a way, it seems to me, and that's this. I think that we have to take a lead from the Americans. The Americans have to step up on this, and they have to speak unequivocally to the Israelis and make it perfectly clear to this far-right government that their behavior is unacceptable and they must allow aid into Gaza. So we must find a long-term solution, and at this stage what we need is for the Americans to step up, to give permission to a group of other countries who are prepared to do this, to sort out a peace settlement for the region.
There has to be a chain of pressure here, doesn't there? It is not enough to say the Americans must pressurise the Israelis. Is the UK government doing enough to pressurise the Americans to put that pressure on Israel?
I think that the way it should work is this. I think there's going to be a conference in June in New York with the Saudi Arabians and the French and the British and probably some other countries as well. And at that stage, I believe that the British and the French should recognise the state of Palestine. We should then be speaking to the Americans and saying, we will go away and sort out a solution to this problem, but we need to do this with you.
We know when the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, met his Israeli counterpart just a couple of weeks ago, we are told that he did speak about lifting the blockade. But if the Israelis are not listening, what more should we be doing? What more should the UK be doing?
I genuinely don't think that the British could be any clearer about what it is that we think the Israelis should be doing. But I think that additional pressure needs to be put on by the Americans.
The UK has to put more pressure on the Americans. And many people would say Keir Starmer is simply not doing that.
It's difficult to know what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, clearly, we've had President Trump saying that we should treat the Gazans nicely, I think is his phrase, which is clearly not happening on any level. But he needs to be much clearer about it, and he needs to put much more pressure on the Israelis than he's doing at the moment. And yes, the international community needs to be perfectly clear with Trump that that is what's needed.
The point is we can discuss and suggest that a lot is going on behind the scenes. But surely the stance that the UK government, specifically the Prime Minister, has taken with Trump, he's been accused of playing softly, diplomacy rather than boldness. Does he need to be bolder with President Trump about his dealings with the Israelis?
I think that Britain is trying to be a force for good in the world. They are trying to be a positive influence on President Trump, and in many ways have been. I think that more needs to be done in order to ensure that President Trump is clearer about what he clearly wants. He wants the Israelis to be, the Gazans to be treated nicely, whatever that means. It clearly doesn't mean that they should be starving to death. And clearly President Trump needs to make it clear to this far-right Israeli government that it is unacceptable for them to behave in this way, and we cannot be allowing innocent children to be starving to death in Gaza.